Welcome to another episode of Many Such Cases.
Many Such Cases is a podcast where we have conversations about the communities, cultures, and economies that are emerging on Farcaster.
All right.
We're back.
We're back. It's actually 11:11 a.m. right now. Do you know about angel numbers? Have you seen this whole angel number thing?
Tell me about it.
I actually don't know.
That's like my level of understanding. I'm like, I think so, but you probably know more, so give me context.
Oh, the Gen Z girls will have to explain this one.
Speaking of Gen Z, tell me about your hat. What is that?
Okay, this is from Cooper's new event series for the summer. It's called The Midnight Diner. And he's putting on a concert series. I don't know how to call it a concert, because it's more of like music sets at this really cool place in Koreatown. Anyways, I had no idea what to expect. It was his birthday yesterday, and it was so cool. So, Cooper, I think you should sell these hats online, do a slice shop for them, because it's actually the first trucker hat I own, and I think it's a vibe. Oh, I didn't even realize there's an IYK pack right there. But the one thing I will say is Cooper has a vision, and it's really cool to see him in his element and to see all of these artists and musicians that he's bringing together and bringing on chain. There's tons of farcasters there. I brought my brother, who I think we talked about this, was onboarding and was like, what is going on with Warpcast? But he met Alex Kwan, Ace, Undefined, OX Chris, Matthew Fox. And he was like, wow, these people are so cool. He was like, I get why you have all these internet Farcaster friends. He was like, they're awesome. And then also the music was a vibe and everyone was there. I had my Farcaster friends there. I had my crypto friends. I had Venice friends. I had music friends. It was amazing. So shout out to Cooper for figuring out, okay, the best way to get people on chain is to bring them all together around a shared experience. I fully believe that the way that people will start to embrace crypto is by going to normal everyday things and non-crypto events and meeting people who work in crypto who are just people who you would meet and become friends with regardless.
Hell yeah. Love that. That sounds amazing.
Yeah, it was. You should come to one.
I will. We're going to do we don't want to leak anything, but we have some exciting IRL experiences lined up. So I'll be at those.
Right. Hell yeah. Yeah, we have a lot lined up. More news coming soon.
Yeah.
But speaking of more news coming soon, what was the news this past week on Warpcast?
There was a lot that happened on Warpcast. A lot to talk about this week. I think the first thing is Nook shutting down. That was, I think, a big moment. So do you want to give us the overview?
Yeah. Earlier this week was also the launch of On-Chain Summer. And so my entire feed was On-Chain Summer, On-Chain Summer, On-Chain Summer, which I love. I think it's so fun. But then it was all On-Chain Summer crypto related content that I was seeing. And I was like, I really want to see non-crypto content. So I casted and said, hey, is there anywhere, any app that is built on Farcaster where I can see non-crypto content? Like Nook, can I do this? Can I hide crypto content and only see other topics? And I cast this and tons of likes, tons of replies. And then truly 10 minutes later, Nook comes out and says, decided today that we're not going to be working on Nook anymore. It was originally meant for us to play around with and learn new tech, and that has served its purpose. We don't really see a path forward in continuing to build the client, so we're going to explore some non-Farcaster ideas instead. More soon. Dun, dun, dun. Anyways, everyone's very impressed and is like, you guys shipped quickly, respect the idea. And then questions started coming in. There's, I think, 60, 70 replies on this cast. But before we dig into other conversations about it,
I think it's also worth mentioning there's another cast that I saw getting a lot of responses and quotes and stuff, which is he says, Farcaster is a place for side projects right now, not serious companies. Maybe we'll change in a few years, but I don't believe we will see another client compete with Warpcast, which makes it all the less interesting to me with the lack of client decentralization. I thought that was another interesting point. So there's certainly a lot
of thought on that one. I
Yep.
have lots of thoughts on that one.
Yeah. So there's a lot to unpack. I mean, and I think that it caught a lot of people by surprise because they just raised a round. And so it's like, oh, cool. Here's a venture-backed company that's building on Farcaster. That's very exciting. I will say, though, at a high level, I think he's right. I think that if you're going to try to compete with Warpcast head on, I just don't see that going well. Counterpoint, Supercast. Uh,
The
I
Supercast is bootstrapped.
It's
Like,
bootstrapped. It's not venture backed. It's paid. It's also like very good at some things for some use cases. It's great when WordCast goes down. Like, I don't know how much opportunity there is for more than just that. So I think that he's right. And this is something that we've been actually saying for a long time, which is if you're going to build a full on client that has casts as its canonical piece of content and not videos or images or long form posts or some other kind of categorically different thing than WordCast, then it's going to be tough. It's going to be really, really tough. So uh, I think he's right there. Now, to
I
go out
agree.
and say that no one can build a venture-backed business, I don't really buy that. I also think that there's a lot of nuance with regard to how we think about the value of the network and what it means to be a client. So from my perspective as a builder, what I like to say is like in and around the Farcaster ecosystem. So Hypersub is not a Farcaster client, and I don't know that we ever will be. But we absolutely have plans to integrate the social graph. Like on profiles, you should be able to see your followers. You should be able to see a feed of the stuff that they're subscribing to. So the social graph, hugely valuable, very, very, very
Yeah.
valuable. Integrating that, does that make us a client? I would say it probably doesn't, but it doesn't mean that there's no value there. And it doesn't mean that you can't bootstrap social interactions, maybe not a social network, but social interactions using Farcaster in the same way thousands of apps did a decade ago, building on top of Twitter and Facebook and so
Do
on.
you
So like
remember when everybody did log in with Facebook? Like,
exactly, and they still do. They
yeah,
still do that now, and you can benefit from the social graph. And privacy controls have gotten better, but were those Facebook clients? I would argue that they were not. But Facebook was still providing an enormous amount of value to the app developer and the end user. And I see something very similar happening now with Farcasters. I thought it was like kind of like overly negative and also specific to like kind of building a clone, like a WordCast clone, but not wrong. So
yeah,
his comments, I agreed with them. I was like, yep, that's pretty much
yeah,
right. Which led me to the question like, so why would you do this? Why wouldn't you try
yeah.
to do something categorically different instead?
So it's really interesting that you say this. There's a couple of things. Is like, yes, I remember when they came out, we were excited about it and we said, oh, but it's like a Warpcast clone. I think we have that on record. And I wondered the same thing. And I remember I had mentioned it to Woj and he was like, no, 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 no. There's like a much larger infrastructure play here that Woj himself was incredibly bullish on. Like, I don't actually know what the vision was, but this also, the cast makes it sound like, oh, it was like a side project in a toy. And for that, I was like, damn, this is like a very, very high quality, like quick to ship toy. The second thing is, I think we all agree that what they were building is not venture scalable. What he was saying is like Farcaster is a place for side projects right now, not serious companies. Because of the position he's in, like a serious company to him is a venture scalable tech company that will onboard 1 million of its own users and take off. And I don't think that a serious company and the definition I just provided are mutually exclusive. Like you can still be a serious company, even if you're not venture scalable. Like there's plenty of bootstrapped small and medium sized businesses that do really well and add value to a lot of people's lives that aren't venture backed. And I just wanted to like dig in there too to be like,
Yeah.
no, 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 no. I think he probably made the wrong comment and he's talking about it from his perspective and what he's looking to do as a founder who raised venture. But there are so many valuable companies that have bootstrapped, done their go to market, et cetera, et cetera. I think Dan even shouts some of those out in his
Hmm.
reply cast.
Yeah, I read that too, and Dan also talked about the time preference of a venture-backed company being quite a bit higher and needing to show more traction sooner. And I got to say, like, I don't agree with that at all. Like, I mean, we're a venture-backed company, and I would say that it's complicated because it's both. Like, we have simultaneously both very low time preference, like we're absolutely playing a long game, and I think that any venture-backed company fundamentally is like think about it. You raise a pre-seed, seed, A, B, C, D. I mean, these stories play out over decades. So it's like if you're trying to be a venture-backed founder, even if you have enormous growth and it's a fairy tale story, look at Coinbase, perfect example.
Oh, yeah.
Yeah, from initial round to IPO, what was that, like 8 years, 10 years? It was a long time. on the one hand, you're very low time preference, not high time preference. And at the same time, you want to be extremely impatient and shipping as fast as possible, getting information as fast as possible, iterating, and so on. So it's like you're in this kind of quantum state of being both extremely impatient and extremely patient. And I think it's important to know, should you be impatient or patient for a given thing? So for growth, I kind of see both sides of it. You have to be willing to play the long game, which might
Yeah.
mean slogging through it for a long period of time. But at the same time, you want to see some progress. There was something that he said that kind of made me laugh, which is he said a client has a one-way dependency on Merkle. This is Kartik. So this is in the thread. He's kind of responding to people and quoting, and he says, client has a one-way dependency on Merkle. The only growth option for a client is to acquire new users. Building in crypto is hard enough. No need for the dependency. And in my mind, I was like, it's like the first thing that popped in my head was like the astronauts in space, with the gun. And it's like, yeah, always has been. Like, whether you're building a farcaster client or not, like acquiring new users is like the hardest thing. That's
the hardest. And
so hard.
the funniest thing, I just like totally spit and like bumped into the microphone because I was so spirited about it. Okay, so a lot of people don't know my background. Like they just know me as Ted on Farcaster. I've had to scale a lot of new products or new features for brands, companies, startups, et cetera, et cetera. And then I think when I came into crypto, I was like, oh shit, like everyone talks about tokens as fixing the cold start problem. And I'm like, crypto is so spoiled in thinking that acquiring new users should be easy. Like,
Yeah.
what world are you living in? It is the hardest thing in the world to acquire new users. So
Yeah.
I giggled at that too, but we've referenced Dan's reply cast, so I'm just going to read it out loud quickly for the readers. He said, Farcaster, Merkle needs to grow daily active users, so they're going all in on Warpcast as a client. We've known this since the start of the year. We've known this as soon as they went permissionless. That's where they're at. Then he talks about the timeline issue that you just referenced. He's like, if you're thinking on a multi-year timeline, you should build now. But if you want to build in the near term, you're shit out of luck. So then he goes into different strategies that you can build on Farcaster. And number one is sign in with Farcaster or the graph-only approach. Focus on the social network, focus on the social graph. This is what Dracula has done. I think this is insanely, insanely powerful.
Same.
The only other equivalent is ENS. So like I know you as nonlinear.eth. That's also your Warpcast username, but ENS doesn't have a social profile behind it unless you set it as your Farcaster username.
That's the power of both of them. It's that ENS is kind of the identity layer, Farcaster is the social layer. The fact that you can link those is so powerful.
What other Farcaster social graph ones?
Who else is just using the social graph?
Are you guys?
Not yet. We will, though. The fact that we're stumped is not good.
No.
Right? We should be able to rattle off.
Good. Oh, events. Duh. Events XYZ. They use the social graph. Very helpful.
That is a great example, actually, of a product that doesn't have casts at all, but absolutely uses the social graph and frames in a really interesting way, because you can create an RSVP to events on Farcaster and they'll sync back to events. That's actually, I think, a great case study. It's a very good example of how to take advantage of Farcaster without entering into this like mimetic competition with Warpcast.
Yeah, it's really coming at it from a social network point of view. Okay, that's the first one. Second one would be build narrow and deep. Growing number of channels where a dedicated channel-specific client may serve a growing number of power users. Study the work in progress nouns client. You have talked about this multiple times. It's like, oh, it should be like the ESPN app where you sign on and you can actually just choose the teams that you want to see. And that is what you can do as well. What else?
TOC, terminally on chain. YB made, I think it might have been the first channel app. So you install the app, it's a PWA, you enable notifications, and then every day you get a notification for a mint. And it was a 7-day thing. I think there was 100,000 higher reward for anyone who did the full 7 days of mints. There was a Hypersub integration there as well. Hypersubs, his terminally on-chain Hypersub subscribers were the only ones that were eligible to receive the reward. So thinking about like being hyper specialized and very deep, it was like a dedicated channel client that had the channel feed in the app. and was very much oriented around the kind of stuff that YB's doing. So that's a great example of depth. I'm not as familiar with the noun stuff, but I know that there's been a lot of experimentation there as well. Once you have a community of people that are really passionate about what you're doing, I think there's a huge opportunity to go very deep. We've talked about stuff with like Club TED. So I think that's like another totally unexplored space. But I think the hard part about that, again, is user acquisition.
Yeah.
Really the hardest thing is finding people who care enough to open the app.
I think he can max out at 500 users and you're
Yeah.
getting very, very interested people. And then as more
Yep.
and more want to come, to me, that would be fine. You have the people that you want on there using it and getting feedback. So if like I ever did this for Club TED, I don't want it to be 1 billion people or 1 million people or 10,000 people even using it. No, I want 100 people who would be using this every single day.
What's interesting about that is it's almost the same approach as Supercast. It's like a channel owner basically saying, oh, this is like a bootstrap business. It doesn't need 1 billion users. It can just have a couple hundred very diehard fans that are willing to pay into it. And it just becomes a very sustainable business, like lifestyle business, which, as people say, is kind of this bad word in Silicon Valley, but it's great. I mean, if you get the economies of scale of software and you can build a thriving community on top of Farcaster, I'd say that's a phenomenal outcome.
Yeah, I completely agree. I was going to ask, I was like, are bootstrapped founders like not sexy as like startup founders? Even
It
though
depends. It
would say,
depends. So in Silicon Valley, I think the lifestyle business approach is definitely looked down on. I think outside of Silicon Valley culture, which is now global, if you told your next door neighbor that you have a business that does $1 million in ARR or 5 or 10 or whatever, that would be amazing. They would think that's incredible. If you are the majority shareholder in that business and a lot of that revenue is just going directly into your pocket, I'd say the vast majority of people in the world would be very, very happy about that. The reason why, venture capitalists are less excited about that outcome is because they need to generate outsized returns, for their LPs. And so there's just different economics in play. They're swinging for the fences every time.
yeah,
And so I guess that the best criticism of a lifestyle business that I can make is that it's just really, really, really hard to build any successful business. And so if you're going to commit to that journey, then why not try to make a couple $1 billion instead of a couple million if it's the relatively same amount of effort?
yeah,
Obviously, that's my bias. Like, I'm the CEO founder of a venture-backed company, so I buy that. I've worked at small companies, big companies. I've done my own practice, so I find that extremely compelling. But not everybody does, and that's fine. It depends on the founder,
yeah,
But I think it would be phenomenal for Farcaster if you had a handful of channel hosts that built thriving businesses, even if they weren't venture-backed.
yeah. Another thing that I will say about building narrow and deep right now that is narrow and deep, and it's not in a quote unquote channel, but in a group chat is Bracket Game. You can almost think of like, oh, Bracket Game is also incorporating the Farcaster social graph. We didn't give them a shout out. They're incorporating a lot of aspects of Farcaster. And right now for the audience, it's very narrow and very deep. It's people who care about specific sports. And I think he's being very smart about how they're broadening. To me, that could be another quote unquote like channel specific client. Obviously, it will grow from there, but I think they're very smart about their intentionality up front.
Pearl as well. It uses identity. It uses casts in an interesting way, but it's not a direct competitor.
Yeah.
I will say what's interesting about all these examples that we've brought up is they're from founders who've been on Farcaster for quite a while and I think have a lot of context and have been thinking a lot about this. Paul Graham has this thing about sometimes like good ideas actually sound like bad ideas and bad ideas sound like good ideas.
Yeah.
And it's like kind of one of those things where it's like, yeah, if you're brand new, that's the first thought you think is I'm going to just build a better version of this thing. But if you've been around for a long time, you might be like, no, that's not the play. Like the move is to take pieces of this and build something that's actually super differentiated.
That's a great call out. You also just quoted Paul Graham, which was like the whole
Part
point
of the meme.
of the boomer dad.
Well, I embrace the left side of that meme. I am absolutely a boomer dad.
I think the funniest part of that meme was like you were the left side and I was the right side, and we were just poking fun at ourselves.
I mean, I added the soy jack guy
I
pointing to
know.
Steve Jobs. That's literally me. I'm pointing to Steve Jobs with my mouth on the floor. Like, it's hilarious because it's true.
For those who are out of the loop, this is part of Cast Out. We'll talk about this later, but context on the meme is that we were in the meme competition and we had to come up with a good Farcaster meme. We'll show it in the show notes.
Yeah.
But another thing that Dan said was use Farcaster for distribution. Warpcast doesn't penalize links, so build frame, build other features that people can share to their Farcaster audiences, and Paragraph has done this incredibly well.
Yep. Paragraph has done it well.
Hypersub, I would say
I was gonna
Hypersub.
say, I'm not gonna get offended, but like
No,
we've done it
yeah.
as well. Like we use programmable DCs. We have our frames display as links so that you can subscribe. Obviously, I'm there all the time, very active in our channel. We absolutely have been using this for distribution. Warpcast has been the top traffic referrer for us for many, many months. Like it's a huge opportunity. It's constrained, and people, I think, rightly say, yeah, but you can't go viral on Farcaster because the size of the network, like you can on Twitter. I think that's true, but you have to ask yourself the question, like, okay, but are you really going to go viral on Twitter? You know, we have some friends who have gone viral, I would say, for all the wrong reasons on Twitter.
If you know, you know.
If you know, you know, like, but I think it's like, I would much rather be a bigger fish in a smaller pond that's progressively growing than be a tiny little speck of plankton in this ocean where the probability of getting any visibility is super, super low.
I agree with you.
Different strokes for different folks, but as a builder now, I think the return on units of time spent on Farcaster is in general much higher than it would be on Twitter or other platforms.
I agree. I think we have a very interesting relationship with virality. Personally, even as I've had like TikTok videos go viral, not like 30 million views viral, but like, you know, multiple million views. And at the end of the day, you are literally slave to your algorithm. You'll go viral for like 15 minutes, people will forget about you. And then you have to continue repeating the virality over and over and over again.
To me, the power of Farcaster is that you can build community. I mean,
Yeah.
the hardest thing, the absolute hardest thing to do, especially now when attention is so scarce, is to get anyone to care about what you're doing, what you have to say, what you've built, what you're about. No one cares. By default, nobody cares.
Yeah.
So like the way that you build that is you got to start small. You got to find one person. Like I love Dan's thing on this is like thinking in order of magnitude. So just like make it your goal to find one person who gives a shit about you and what you're doing. And then once you found that person, the next goal is to find 9 more. Just get to 10. Once you have 10, get to 100 and just keep expanding from there.
And then launch
like,
a hypersub.
there you go. There you go. But I think that's like basically impossible to do in these legacy social networks like Twitter, Instagram.
They're not social networks anymore. They're social
just
media.
cooked. It's like good luck trying to find a single person, let alone 10, let alone 100, that gives a flying fuck about what you're doing. So I think finding new spaces, new networks, that's where the probability of that is much higher. That to me is the pitch for Farcaster. Like if you're trying to go viral, I'd be like, yeah, don't go to Farcaster. It's just not going to happen.
No.
But if you're playing a long game and you want to find people who care, it's way more likely to happen there than it is anywhere else.
Yeah, I agree. People keep asking me, like, what is it about Farcaster? I'm like, oh, it's like my community. Like, it's my community. And even my brother last night is amazing. Like, he was like, oh, I really want to create like an LA pizza channel. Or like, I want my shtick to be like LA pizza. I am obsessed with LA pizza. It's having a renaissance. And he's like, do you think? And I was like, well, if you post it on Twitter, like, who the hell is going to find you? You have to like be posting all the time. And like, if you do it on TikTok, like, yeah, it could go viral and maybe you'll get it, but you'll have to do like reviews of all this stuff. And he was like, wait, I should just do it on Farcaster and like start small. And like, I'm like, yes, man. So it was encouraging to hear him see the value on it. And I know we're getting off of the use it for distribution, but basically you should use it. Yeah, bring us back.
Yeah, if you go back to Dan's initial thing, like we have to grow daily active usage in order for this to be an attractive place for developers. And I think that if you read between the lines there, it's like the reason why we care about developers is because downstream of developers are users. The thesis there being that if developers like this, they'll build great experiences and that will attract new users. So there's this kind of like proxy step. Like what you really want is end users, and the way that you get that is through developers. But like another way to get that would be through creators. So you could imagine if the channel becomes the thing, like your brother, for example, he's like, oh, I'm going to do this channel. It's going to be about this. It has kind of a theme. It has a brand. It has a culture that starts to emerge. It has content. It has its own memes, potentially its own tokens, right? All kinds of fun stuff that you could do. That then starts to draw in new users. So now it's like whether you're getting it through charismatic, creative, interesting people doing fun stuff with their channel, or whether you're getting it from developers, kind of irrelevant. At the end of the day, what you really want is usage from end users. So I don't know. I see channel creators as being like a potentially big unlock for new activity on the network.
I agree with you. Next one is build orthogonally. Integrate multiple networks, use subset of casts, image or video only client, just focus on functionality. He gives a shout out to Farhouse, which is like the Clubhouse equivalent on Farcaster, or yep. I'm most excited about this one because it adds net new content to the network. I think you
Agreed.
could also say Dracula ends up being in here in like, oh, when you post a Dracula, it's posting a ton of videos to Warpcast as well. So I'm most excited about build orthogonally.
Yep, I agree. I totally agree with that. I would say like A and D are kind of the same. If you're just using the social graph, probably you're going to end up building orthogonally. I see those as like very similar. And then the last one was play a different game, right?
We already talked about this pretty much. Open source
Okay.
project. We gave a shout out to Supercast. It goes back to our whole conversation about like bootstrapping and the smart thing to do. And I think Woj is like brilliant and dedicated and committed and resilient and knows it's going to be fucking hard. But he's like, you know what? I'm bullish on this. I have strong conviction about this working out. Also, David Furlong is here too with what he's doing with frames and honing in completely on like, let's focus on frames for developers and go from there.
Yep. Agreed.
That is a lot of conversation from one cast, which was ultimately me going, where's the non-crypto content? And Nook in reply being like, oh, good luck finding it. But they are open sourcing what they've built, which I think would be amazing if any client that isn't Replica or even Warpcast were to integrate it. So that's all.
Yeah, it's funny. A couple weeks ago after FarCon, there was this cast that Xerox Designer made, and it ignited a lot of discussions and replies and thinking. And it's like, I think every once in a while, someone will do something or say something that captures what a lot of other people have been thinking and feeling. And this is certainly one of those, which is like, what is the relationship between Warpcast and other clients? And what is client diversity like on the network? And thinking about these things like temporally, like, what is it like right now? What will it be like in the future? What are the viability of this? Them coming out and announcing this, was like everyone was already kind of primed.
Farcaster's dead.
I think Farcaster's been dead a couple times in the past few years. This is maybe the third or fourth time I've heard that the network's dead.
I will say I do think it's important for us to be intellectually honest. And Farcaster isn't dead, but it's also not 100,000 daily active users. It's not at 50,000 daily active users. And I've seen this a couple times where people will comment on stuff. So like Farcaster's dead and people will be like, no, it's not. And it's like, okay, like actually, why are people thinking it's dead? And what's the perception? And I think when we're too culty as a Farcaster unit, it comes across as like clicky. And then people are like, oh, wait, like they don't get it. I get why people want to defend Farcaster because we love it. But also at the same time, it's like, it's okay if somebody else doesn't like it. And that's totally fine. It's not for everyone.
So completely agree. I'm very curious, like, what specifically might someone not like? And when you say it's culty, like, what does that mean? My own answer to this is that it's like overly positive. It's kind of a monoculture in the sense that it's just like a lot of crypto builders. But I'm curious what you've heard or what you think when you say culty, what does that mean?
Okay, so there's two aspects. We're like, why wouldn't people like it? And then what does culty mean? Culty means sometimes if there's feedback that's posted, Farcaster people, especially on Twitter or especially elsewhere, will come and will screenshot whatever the criticism is and share it on Warpcast. And then people will, I don't want to say dunk, but they are like, oh, they don't get it. And that's fine, but there is a little bit of truth in every piece of feedback. And I think it's more valuable for us to be like, okay, like what's the truth there? Or they'll just defend it to the core. And a lot of times I think the default is like, oh, well, you don't really use it, so you can't talk about it. And I think that's clicky and that's a little culty is like,
Mm-hmm.
oh, like you're not entitled to an opinion because you're not there all the time. And I'm like, I don't think that's the way to grow
Mm-hmm.
the cult. So that's the culty part. The other part is why don't people like it? I even casted this or casted this. I tweeted it saying like, if you recently joined and onboarded and thought, what the fuck is going on? Please DM me because you are not alone and you may be entitled to compensation. And I have 40 replies on this tweet that are all quite genuine in nature. There might be like one or two bad faith people, but a lot of it is I feel like I'm screaming into the void. I don't know how to find my tribe. I just like don't see a lot of value there. Like the content's not that interesting. And so those are legitimate concerns for me for people who are like, oh, like I'm not getting any engagement. Like that's the point of joining a social network. The content I'm seeing is like too crypto oriented or like, oh, it's just like not high quality. Also valid. And the other thing is like, it's just like confusing and I need to figure out how to work it. I think all of those are valid criticisms and why you wouldn't like it. It's like, okay, if you go into a room and you feel like everyone's ignoring you, and then you also can't figure out like how to get to the bar or how to go to the bathroom, you're going to have a bad experience. Think about if it was a party. So I think all of those are valid criticisms. What I'm a little more skeptical about is people who are like, oh, there's no alpha on there. People aren't doing like full analysis or thoughtful analysis. I'm like, okay, but you have to remember like this is a social network. And yeah, if you're looking for alpha, go to the highest information density place on crypto Twitter. Like you're not going to find that on Farcaster. And so again, like this is where I feel intellectual honesty is important is I'm like, okay, yeah, if you're looking for alpha and you're a crypto trader and like that stuff matters to you, Farcaster isn't the right place for you right now. And that's okay. And I think we need to be better about accepting that not everyone's going to like it. Somebody who loves Farcaster and is betting my life and my career on the future of on-chain social, you take it personally when someone criticizes or doesn't like what you're doing or what you believe in. And you gotta let that roll off. Like you just gotta let
Mm-hmm.
that roll off the back.
I have some thoughts and some hot takes in response to this.
Go for it.
First thing is Farcaster was ground zero for alpha on some projects, right? Like if you
I
were
agree.
paying attention to degen, I mean, there there are people who made millions of dollars on degen, probably less on hire and enjoy and some other things. So I think that though I agree that it's not oriented toward that, it absolutely has happened. Maybe less so than in other ecosystems, but it's for sure something that's happened and I think probably will happen again if you're paying attention.
One other
Um,
thing
yep,
related is that I also think that the alpha that you got from those projects is a little bit more sustainable than like the pump and dump meme coins that you
uh,
might find elsewhere. It's like,
yep,
okay, great. You might have made a lot of money from like a quick pump and dump meme coin or shitcoin, but the projects or the quote unquote alpha is like much more sustainable based on like degen, higher, and
mm-hmm,
yeah.
mm-hmm.
Okay. That was
Yeah, I
my little
agree.
intro.
The other thing that I'll say is that I don't know why they haven't done this, and I think it would make the experience so much better is I'll just call it channel gaps. This is something that you brought up a long time ago, which is like, let me mute a channel. Something I also wish I could say is don't show my casts in this channel to anyone else. I want this to be a little air gapped space. And so when I think about someone joining community, I could say like, okay, cool. I will only see casts from the other people within this channel and then my cast will only be displayed here so that you don't feel like you're in this black hole, everything just kind of disappears. I think that having the cozy corners feel a little more cozy by virtue of the fact that they're like not in the main feed or that maybe that's all your main feed is, I think would be big. As far as the culty stuff, I mean, here's a hot take. There's like many variants on this quote of like, show me the incentive and I'll show you the outcome, or you can never convince a man of something that his paycheck doesn't want him to be convinced of, or whatever, like this whole thing around incentives. I think what's happened on Farcaster is that a lot of the people who were early, this is all of our first taste of having real distribution. This is true for me, you, and hundreds of other people on Farcaster who have either like 0 to a couple thousand followers on Twitter, which is effectively nothing, have many thousands, tens of thousands, or in some cases, hundreds of thousands of followers on Farcaster. what we all know, what everyone on every network knows, whether we want to believe it or not or admit it or not, is that followers are valuable. Followers are like currency
We've
on
talked
any
about
social
this.
network. Followers are status. If you have followers, you have status. The reason why I feel, and I think you and many others, where we like need Farcaster to win because that's where all of our status has accrued. So if it loses, right, if Farcaster just dies and goes nowhere, then we're all back to the drawing board. And so I think we all have that kind of skin in the game. And so when someone attacks it, in some ways, they're kind of indirectly attacking us, you know? And if
Yeah.
they win, if that means that we lose. And so it's like, no, 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 no. Like, don't talk shit about the thing that is giving me distribution, you know, and that's giving me a megaphone. But the funny thing about this is that the inverse is also true. For people who have built these enormous audiences on Twitter, single digit thousands, tens of thousands, hundreds of thousands. I mean, Bored Elon has over 1 million followers on Twitter, and he's actually quite active on Farcaster as well. But like having it, Farcaster in some ways represents this disruptive threat where you're like, wait a minute, hold on. I have spent years, many years working very hard to get status on Twitter. Don't come and tell me that's over, that was wasted effort and that the future is Farcaster. Fuck that. I don't accept that. So I think like underneath a lot of the cultiness of Farcaster and people being like, no, Farcaster is the greatest thing ever, and the inverse, I would say there's almost like a cult that's equally as opposed to Farcaster. I think what's driving a
Yeah.
lot of this underneath is people feeling threatened, you know,
Yeah.
feeling like the work that they've done is under attack and kind of like clapping back. So
Yeah. And I agree that as somebody myself who's like bet my future on Farcaster winning, I understand why it feels personal. But remember, like 20% of
yeah,
people in life aren't going to like you, and that's okay. And again, that was a little bit of a segue.
was.
But it's a good segue because we wanted to cover some cozy corners that are emerging as channels, emerging as like smaller communities because we're excited about these. We want more people to know about them. Farcaster, as small as it is still noisy. And so you're not seeing everything that we're getting.
I think it's great. I love it. The first one that we have listed here, which is funny and counterintuitive, is FBI, not the Federal Bureau of Investigation, but Farcaster Builders India, which is this amazing group of what it sounds like developers that are based in India that are building on Farcaster. I first became aware of them because of Proxy Studios' involvement. So Proxy's a Hypersub creator, and he went to India. They made this a really cool trailer, like very high production quality video, beautiful video. They've been writing about the work they've been doing, publishing their work. And Adrian talked about the Scenius at FarCon 1. And I feel like they have their own scene and culture that's emerging. And so I'm here for it. I'm excited to see it. It does, when we think about cozy corners, it feels very much like a corner and very cozy. So shout out to them.
Hell yeah. Yeah. Shout out to them. And they're also doing summer camp, on-chain summer camp, where they're going to 3 weeks work with developers who've applied and then idea partners. So lots
You,
of idea partners. I'm an idea
me,
partner.
I'm
You're,
on.
you're an idea partner. So lots of idea partners. I'm actually looking to like roll up my sleeves and get a little bit more involved than just an idea partner. I think this is also amazing because so many people give feedback. Farcaster is so US specific. It's so Euro. And this is a great example of no, actually, if you find a bunch of like-minded people in a different country, you can build a really strong community around it. Shout out to the entire team and actually one of the FBI builders. I'm afraid that I'm going to pronounce her name wrong. Gayatri just did the most recent viral frame, quote unquote viral, which was find out how much your Farcaster account is worth and
Yeah.
what someone could pay you to run an ad, which was fun. Like I'm obsessed. I'm so excited. It's great energy. Okay, next Cozy Corner, which is a much, much smaller scale than FBI, is this new first draft channel by Mark Fishman, which is a bunch of people who are like, hey, I'm committed to writing more, but I want an accountability partner to do it with. So we're all going to get together. We're all going to pay in 20 USDC. And if we miss it, we have to pay more or we don't get our money back. I forget how the accountability works, but every Monday morning by 9 a.m. Pacific or Eastern, we post first draft that we wrote. It's this new cozy corner that's emerging for people who want to write together and read each other's writing and get into that habit. And then tomorrow we're even going to do like a first draft Friday where we're all going to hang out in a gather for an hour and actually try and write together.
That's awesome. You're going to have to speak to the next few. So I know tabletop is I Speak Nerd. I saw you guys do a live stream. I'm like, okay, I know
Yeah.
there's cool stuff happening here. I have no context on it.
Okay, I'm going to butcher this. So I Speak Nerd. Maybe we should have him on to do like a quick little cozy corner feature. He is very, very passionate about games, and tabletop is actually one of the biggest channels on Farcaster. I don't know if you know that, but it has like 70,000 people in it, I think. I think it's like a
Wow.
huge channel. And we did a tabletop meetup at FarCon that was an absolute hit. And so I Speak Nerd is amazing. He's like, okay, I see the opportunity with channels. I am going to try and see what I can do to make tabletop a like channel oriented business. And part of kicking that off is, okay, we're going to host a summertime tabletop channel tournament where you had to buy in and kind of like buy your summer tournament access pass. And then now you can participate in all these games, which is really fun because you're spending more time with people that I wouldn't have spent time with. The first tournament game that we did was Dominion. Dude, I had never played. Dan showed up. Dan played first round. He was in the motherfucking zone. He was like zoned in. And I was like, oh my God, it's just the pace of the game. It was great. Like, and you can see, okay, it's revenue generating. Like, basically, we all paid money to do this. He's hosting the gather. He owns the gather. People can join in. It's live streaming out on Lonely. It's very interoperable. And then I even said afterwards, I was like, oh, if I'm going to kick back up my poker games, can I just do all my poker games like through your tabletop? Can I use your gather? And can I do the live stream and like, et cetera? And he's like, yeah. And there's even like a poker integration on gather. So I think this is just the start, but to me, that one is another interesting one because it's somebody taking a big bet on building a channel anchored business around a specific topic.
What I love about this, and the other one on our list, which is YB for Terminally on Chain, we've already talked about, is it really, really blurs the line between what is a developer and what is a creator. And I
Yeah.
think that's like, if you have this like mental frame of like, oh, developer, it's like a software engineer who's going to write code, and it's like, yeah, maybe, sure, that's one of the things, but that's not like the only kind of persona or like entity that can like help bring in new users and contribute to usage and growth. So very cool. I had no idea that's how it worked. I'm going to go mint the NFT just to support it because I think it's cool. And
Yeah.
I think the more outcomes like that you have, like if that's sustainable and you can do that on a recurring basis and make money, that's amazing. So what we have on the list is Lounge. We already kind of talked about Terminally on Chain, Club TED, Cast Out, which is what we're in the middle of playing right now, and then Higher Run Club. I will say I don't have a lot of context on any of these except probably Terminally on Chain and Club TED and Cast Out. But like I see these things kind of pop up in my feed, and what it seems like is happening is people are very passionate and they're orienting around a specific idea or whatever practice. And it's awesome. I think for Club TED, it's like, it's a great group chat. It's like people that have hung out multiple times IRL that share information, observations. I think a lot of trust there, like people share things you probably wouldn't otherwise. And then it's fun. Like we were sharing dog photos a couple days
It's so
ago. So it's
fun.
like, yeah, I don't know. That's the only other one from this list that I like am involved with and can comment on.
It's interesting. I think Club TED it actually just feels like a 24/7 dinner party in a way. It's like there's like unhinged stuff, there's like serious stuff. It is like circle or kind of truth. Then there's people from all industries. So it's interesting. You guys will be part of the journey as we think about what V2 of Club TED looks like. I think we can talk about Cast Out next week, like maybe when the game is over, because
Yeah. When the
more to
game is
cover.
over and you've already won it.
I don't think I will win. I think that there are some people who are out to get me. We already know that. We saw it. We saw it play out. So, anyways.
The
Okay.
knives are coming out.
I know. I think these are also important, or like games are important because it's very memeable, right? Like
Hmm.
we casted a meme. The meme was like the best challenge. And then the meme like proliferates. And then I cast some dumb thing that's like, I know everything that you guys are doing because it's all public data. And basically that became a meme in and of itself. And everyone was just
Yeah.
like copy pasting it and making it even funnier. Like mine was intended to be like slightly funny, but everybody else's were, I was like peeing. I was laughing so hard.
It was very
Oh,
good. Like whether you knew it or not when you wrote it, the first time I read it, I was like, "Oh my God. Like this is perfect copy pasta." And other people realized that as well, and it just took off. Funny comment on that. There was a Kristen
she's so funny.
she said something. Yeah, she was like, "Please unlike the other team's meme." And then in the reply, she's like, "If this comes off as zero sum, I just want you to know that it's because I'm conscientiously caring for my teammates." And I cracked up laughing at that phrase. So then yesterday, when I casted something about the competition, someone was like, "What? Like, what is this?" And then I just quoted her. And I was like, "It's just me conscientiously caring for my teammates." And then she DM'd me and she was like, "Nice." She's like, "I'm not gonna lie, that like kind of cut me." But she's like, "I feel seen in the most fucked up way."
Love it.
Yeah.
Huge kudos to Nanish Prof for doing this. The meme challenge really brought us
It
together.
was fun.
Quickly, do we want to talk about the team?
Yes. Let's talk about it. And then I don't want to get
Wrap.
sucked into it for too long,
No,
but
no,
yeah, go
no.
ahead.
It's a 5-minute segment. All
Yeah,
right.
yeah.
Basically, if you missed it, here's a little recap of what happened. Is Gigamesh basically screenshot all of these casts from a channel called Power Feed. And he writes, exciting to see so many crypto-curious human women joining Farcaster. He was like, it's hard for me to believe that a bunch of cute girls without any identity attestation are posting selfies in a channel. And he was like, I just think that it's like bots. Like, you know, like people do this all the time. They prey on men with really hot women. And that did not go over well at all. They were like, I can't believe you're calling this fake, et cetera, et cetera. I jumped in there and I said, to be honest, I saw those casts too. And I was like, okay, like I also think that they're bots, but not because of like the photos or because of what they look like, but because of like the actual text content felt very copy pasta AI generated. And so I said that and I was like, regardless, like you guys are both right. Like he shouldn't have insinuated that people like aren't real once he realized that they are real. And then like also the girl, like admit that your content is like the broadcast social media content that we're used to on Instagram.
I thought both sides were totally fair. Like I thought that his call out was I didn't think it was unfair. I was like, okay. And then I thought it was hilarious that all these beautiful women were basically taking selfies like with Farcaster open and the date and being like I'm real. And so I thought that was great. And I loved that more and more women started doing it. And it just felt like I don't know. I thought that was really great. Where it took a turn is where people started calling me sexist and racist. And my take on that was I was like, oh, this is like the language and culture of Twitter, which is rage baiting and like the oppression Olympics. It's like who can be the most offended, who can win at being the most offended. And I think that culturally, it doesn't get you status on Farcaster like it does on Twitter. And so I think at that point, everyone just kind of lost interest and it fell flat. At least that was the
Yeah.
case for me. I think with many other people, he kind of kept leaning into it. There were other people that kept leaning into it. I think with a lot of these like sort of games, like mimetic games and scapegoating games that happen, is that for the people that are like the most active, they kind of don't realize when like there's no longer a crowd and like nobody ever cares. Like no one cares anymore. Everyone's moved
Yeah.
on. They're so in it that they just kind of keep going, which is
Yeah.
it seemed like a little bit of that happened. But I thought it was like a funny
It
like
was hysterical.
yeah.
It
I
was
was like
so funny. And I was
yeah
like proud of the girls because I was like, the
same
girls were like,
yeah. I was
also,
like
they're
rooting
so hot. Like they are undeniably hot.
yeah
So they're posting these like hot selfies that like I am too afraid to ever try. Also, they're just like categorically out of all of our leagues. And I was like, wow, this is hysterical. And like I'm on both sides here, but like please don't fight. Like this is funny,
yeah.
but like guys, don't fight. Like keep it
Let it
fun.
be.
Keep
This
it
could
yeah.
be a funny meme, and it could like be supportive, not tearing people down. I mean,
Yeah.
the other thing that I like to say is like as far as the language or like the barrier, it's like I don't speak Czech or Bulgarian or Russian or wherever in the world they're from. Like, so I'm not gonna shit on like the the text. You know what I mean? Like they're speaking English, they're writing English. Like, and so if it comes off a little like choppy or off, I mean, I can look past that. Like there, it's
Johnny,
certainly
Johnny,
more than what
Johnny,
I can
Johnny,
say.
Johnny, 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 Johnny.
You don't
Be
buy it?
be intellectually honest with
I
yourself
am.
right
I'm
now.
being I'm being
Okay.
so I'm
You
being totally
saw,
honest.
I will say, when they had to defend themselves, that was real text content. That was like, okay, when they were doing it, they were like, haha, this is me. Like, what are you going to say? Like, apologize. That was
Okay.
all like, I was like, okay, that's legit. Like, these are like, I'm like, this is interesting content because it seems real. The the post that he first posted, like, come on, like,
Okay, hold on,
you
hold on.
know it,
I
you
am
know.
being intellectually honest.
Okay,
Let
here we
and let
go.
let me tell
Ready?
you. Okay.
Show hot chain summer. Show your summer in this channel. Fire, 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 fire emoji. Lightning, 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 lightning emoji. Like, come on. Like, Nani,
But
if
my
I
point.
posted that shit, people would be like, what are you doing? And
Okay, but okay.
that's not English as a second language issue.
How do
Do
you
not
know?
try and convince yourself that.
Okay, how do you know that?
Because then you see how they talk and how they comment when they're being accused of being fake. And I'm like, that's true content. Like, I'm here for this because it wasn't emoji, 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 emoji.
Okay,
Here's
but
a hot photo of me, and I'm saying like on chain summer. Like, come on.
I see this a lot in memes. People will post they'll post memes and then the text it's like an otherwise good
It's
cast,
not a
but the text
memes
is no good.
channel.
Yeah, but I'm talking about like the cultural barriers. Like or like how I text or how I might like write might be different than the way you write, especially for like different ages, different parts of the world. Like I'm not going to just come out and say like, "Oh, they're, like this isn't authentic." It could very well be authentic. It's just that there's like a language barrier. And also they're writing in English, not their own
Johnny, I
native
agree with
language.
you. They're real people. Their casts are quote unquote authentic. Like
Hmm.
they're true casts. I'm not saying it's like bot generated thing. I'm saying like one of them is like engaging conversation that people are like, okay, I'm gonna respond to this. The other one is, again,
Broadcast. I
it's
think
a
that's a fair way to
Instagram
frame it.
caption. To me, they read as Instagram captions and like this is an Instagram. There will be an Instagram client. This isn't it. We're gonna use Instagram as comparison. I want to see is the stories content. I don't want to see the main feed, like the square feed
Uh-huh.
content. And that was like those are
Hmm.
Instagram captions that
Okay,
they were
but maybe they
posting.
do. Maybe they do. Maybe that's what they're about. Like,
But again, that's totally fine for that. But I don't
yeah,
care
and
for
it doesn't
that.
mean they're fake,
I never said they were fake. I've never said they were fake. I exclusively said that type of content, Instagram captions, do
Uh-huh.
not work well on Farcaster because
It
that's
may
not what people are here for.
Okay, but I've said this on multiple episodes, which is that a sign of this network being successful will be new people joining and not giving a shit about the lore and the culture that exists today, but instead making a new lore and new culture.
And they do. They
And
do.
and that and I'm here for it. It might not be
Me
for
too.
me, but if they want to do Instagram feed, text and thirst traps, like, hey, go for it.
To be clear, I'm not telling them to stop. I actually don't see this stuff. And like, that's the way Workcast and Farcaster should work is like, I see the stuff that I like to see and I engage with it. But if you're going to ask why people don't think you're real, or if you're going to be like, Farcaster isn't friendly or we don't get a lot of likes on this stuff, I am explaining to you why that might be. I'm
Okay.
not saying you're
Yeah, I
right or
agree.
you're wrong,
Okay.
but like
Yeah.
they can keep posting that and like I'm here for it. I love that. Again, like
I'm
I
gonna go engage. I'm gonna go follow these accounts and I'm gonna reply guy them. I think it's great. I want to see more of it.
yeah,
People making their own culture.
we're
Thanks.
aligned. We're aligned. Okay, that's it. Fun little
All right.
episode.
Long one.